I will sing them a song of the pain you are feeling, of the lives they are stealing, and the never-ending lies. I will sing of the tears, of the days that have been wasted, of the fear and cruel hurt that never dies. They will lock you away when they cannot understand you. It's easier to damn you than ever learn to care.
Thomas was just a bundle of mischief, really. Fun, cheeky, energetic. He used to like to run everywhere, abscond. It was just amazing. Compassionate, definitely. Never met a little boy who was so caring, but he got himself into an awful lot of mischief. That just started to change when he hit his teens, and things got more complex. It was very clear that there was something else. Puberty, fighting against his learning disability, really, and his autism that wasn't diagnosed. So he was a very complex little man. Beautiful, but very complex. I couldn't do it by myself, couldn't do it alone. We needed support. Thomas needed support there and then, but it just wouldn't happen. Nobody could do it. And within a year, Thomas was sectioned for the first time. And we were talking about other counties, other hospitals, and I knew that Thomas couldn't cope with this. Nobody was listening to me. I knew Thomas was going to die there. I kept telling them that Thomas was going to die there.
You're right, Tom.
The day that the Court of Protection sent him there, I broke down as if I'd already lost Thomas, because I knew something really bad was going to happen. And it did. And not just the fact that he died, but for the 4 years of hell that he was put through before that. And now the memories that I've been left with. Not the beautiful little boy, but the memory of a little boy suffering, distressed, and just wanting his family and to be comforted. That's what I've been left with. I fought and fought to get Thomas home, and I got him home eventually in a coffin, but that's not the way it should be.
Paula is not alone. There are an estimated 3,000 people with autism and learning difficulties living in assessment and treatment units.
A person with autism deserves respect and love, not a hospital where they're locked up.
950 of these 3,000 shouldn't be there.
What is the treatment? I mean, there is no treatment, is there? Being locked in a room and drugged, how can that be treatment? You know, he didn't learn anything. He didn't make any friends there. Didn't hardly see anyone. Lost seeing all his family. And we were treated like criminals ourselves.
Across the country, parents are desperate to get their children home.
So when Stephen left home that Wednesday afternoon, the plan was he was going for 3 days respite, and I'd go and pick him up on the Saturday. And you know, that's the worst mistake I've ever made in my life, because it took a year to get him back home again.
But with nowhere for them to go, short-term treatment units have turned into long-term hospital sentences.
And what was supposed to be 6 weeks assessment, which we weren't that pleased about in the first place, but we thought we'd be brave because we thought that's what our son needed, it's now turned into a 9-month prison sentence and counting.
Sensory overload, intense anxiety, importance of routine, difficulty of communication, repetitive behaviours and interests. These are just some of the symptoms that people with autism experience on a daily basis. Autism is a lifelong developmental disability that you've probably heard of by now. But what happens when people with autism reach crisis point? Outdated institutional care that many of us thought had closed down decades ago still exist. They're called assessment and treatment units, meant for short-term crisis care, a last resort. But too often, these hospitals are becoming homes. On average, they're locked up for almost 5 years, an eternity for powerless parents. But this is a reality for thousands of families. Families are losing their children in a system that's meant to be helping them.
And throughout all 3 sectionings, there were things going horribly wrong. Whilst I was going to everybody, I was screaming from the rooftops. Speaking to Norman Lamb, Department of Health, sending them pictures saying something terrible is going to happen to my son. If I've even got a text message saying I'm trying to save my son's life at a meeting, a safeguarding meeting, 3 weeks before Thomas died, I sat there and I said, "You are going to kill my son." In tears, I knew it was going to happen.
The care provider Lifeways denies any mistreatment of Thomas during the time he spent in their care, and this does not form part of the inquiry into his death. Thomas's family fought to bring him home for 3.5 years.
Thomas's dad was as desperate as me by this point, and we were discussing ways how we could kidnap him and get his medication. Would we be arrested, really? Do you know what I mean? Would they really arrest us? Because how bad would it look? We were discussing all that. But then we got to the point where, but we'd still have no support. As soon as Thomas was sectioned, everybody agreed with me that he needed a bespoke package. Everybody, all the professionals, agreed that's what he needed, and that he couldn't tolerate other service users. He needed to be close to us. He needed to be able to see us every day. So that wasn't a problem, but getting anything done and getting anybody to communicate with each other was the problem.
An independent panel said that Thomas should live in his local community in a flat with support. Bradford Council said they had no appropriate housing. So instead, he was sent to Sheffield to a challenging behaviour unit over 50 miles away from home. 6.5 months later, he died. Paula has fought for a coroner's inquest as she feels there are still many unanswered questions. When I approached Bradford Council, Bradford City's NHS Clinical Commissioning Group and the care providers Lifeways, they all refused to comment due to the ongoing inquest. But the question remains, why was a child that was deemed able to live in the community denied the right to do so?
There are some areas where there doesn't seem to be the will to do that. So once again, we almost seem to have a postcode lottery about who is actually going to get out with the right kind of support and help quickly, and who's going to be longer and longer in situations where they're going to be just continuing with further and further inpatient care.
Jane believes that many children are being detained illegally and is now helping 18 families to take a class action against their local councils and NHS providers.
People are fighting to get their children and young people home, close to them or back to the family home. They want people to have decent housing, and they want them to have the appropriate care that means that they can actually return home and be supported properly by their families and by people who really want to see their aspirations of the young person met. People with autism can't be cured.
Hi, Eden.
Did we get my text?
Yeah, I just got your text just now, babe. What do you reckon? You reckon I should have a takeaway?
One of the mums planning to take legal action is Debbie Evans. Her son Eden has autism and learning disabilities and has lived in institutional care for the last 7 years.
Aiden's lost so much of his life. He's lost nearly all his teenage life, and now he'll be 25 at Christmas. So he's lost a massive chunk. Some of that might be brought back, but he's been completely traumatised for what he's been through. They should be held accountable and they need to step up to their duty.
Debbie says that he had no formal education from the age of 8 because there was no proper provision. She asked for help when caring for Eden 24/7 became too much. It was meant to be short-term care, but he's still there.
The worst thing I ever did was ask for help. It broke my heart doing it. I didn't want to do it. Yeah, I thought he was going to get decent treatment, some learning, some people that could offer him what I couldn't offer him. Trained professionals, I thought they'll be able to give him these things. I think I'm doing the right thing. But, it hasn't worked out that way.
Debbie thinks Eden's condition has got worse since being detained due to isolation and over-medication. He put on 16 stone in weight over 5 years.
They would bring him over with faeces all down the back of his trousers, and he'd smell dreadful, and his hair, you could see like it hasn't been washed. Although I'd take shower gels in and various things, you could see it hadn't been washed because his hair always looked wet, and I knew it wasn't wet.
The unit refused to comment on the grounds of patient confidentiality. Eden has now been moved to another specialist unit, but Mum Debbie is still desperate to get him home. When I approached Hammersmith and Fulham for a response, they told me that at Eden's request, they couldn't give me any information regarding his case or care. These are not isolated cases. Of the 3,000 people with learning disabilities in inpatient units, 1,160 people are on the autism spectrum. 43% have been there for between 1 and 5 years. 17% have been resident for more than 5 years. and 13% have been in these units for over 10 years. I put the claim that hospitals are being used as homes to NHS England. They refused to give me an interview, but they did make it clear to me that even if someone has got extremely complex needs, this should not be the case, and that they are confident in their policy homes, not hospitals. This latest initiative is part of the wider Transforming Care plan. With an investment of £45 million, the target is to get up to half of these people out over the next 3 years. But since the Winterbourne scandal of 2011, where the widespread abuse of residents was exposed in a BBC panorama, the government has repeatedly promised and failed to get these people out. So why will this initiative work when all others haven't?
Traditionally, splitting of funding between health bodies and social care bodies has, I think, been a significant issue in enabling people to move out. Once someone as a cost, which is a horrible way to think of a human being, but once someone as a cost is moved out of social care budget, bringing them back in with perhaps an incredibly costly package can be very difficult. But what Transforming Care has done is recommend that everywhere pools their budgets when they are developing their services, so that you remove some of those traditional historic perverse incentives to almost kind of keep people in units, and you can more effectively just shuffle the money around as it's needed to fund the community services.
But former Care Minister Norman Lamb is sceptical about NHS England's commitment to share its budget with local councils. He oversaw the 2012 Concordat, a policy that promised to get all patients out of inappropriate care by June 2014, a policy that failed.
We tried to get a way of sharing the resources between NHS England and local authorities, but I've recently heard that the commitment from NHS England to move the money through to the local authority has now, it appears, been withdrawn. Every part of the system is under impossible financial pressure. So NHS England wants to divest themselves of responsibility without recognising that one of the ways in which you get people out is by giving financial assurance to the local authority that they're not going to be stuck with an enormous financial black hole.
The commissioning system is made up of 3 big bureaucratic organisations: NHS England, local authorities and clinical commissioning groups. The problem is the system's very complex, as they each have their own budgets. Social care comes under the domain of local authorities, whereas healthcare comes under the NHS. In fact, it costs the NHS more to keep people in inpatient units than it would for local authorities to keep people in the community. On average, it costs £112,000 per year to keep someone in the community, whereas according to my Freedom of Information findings, it costs a total of £182,000 a year to keep someone in hospital.
There is the potential for a much better life at a lower cost. This is the extraordinary thing, that the state manages to resist the attraction of achieving better care at a lower cost through the sort of, the inertia in the system.
Even those within the system have their doubts over the policy.
There's a lot of discharges taking place, but it's matched by the number of new people going into hospital. And the other thing which is a problem is that budgets that local authorities have is generally being reduced across the country.
According to the National Audit Office, one of the main reasons for the failure of the 2014 Concordat was because the government left it to NHS England to deliver change. The new policy is again reliant on NHS England keeping local councils and commissioners to account. When I tried to get answers from the Department of Health regarding criticisms of the Transforming Care plan, they refused to answer and directed me to NHS England. Families seem to have had the same experience. Directed from department to department, they're unable to get answers. Care Minister Alistair Burt advised one mum to seek help from the Citizens Advice Bureau. So a question mark remains over who will keep NHS England to account.
I'm feeling quite anxious actually, because I'm not sure how he's feeling right now. I might get there, maybe the visit is only going to be about 2 minutes, and that is quite upsetting. The worst part is if he is okay and he asks to come home with mummy. That's very upsetting to think that I'm his mother and I can't take him out. And it's shocking, it's upsetting. Why should I have to apply to a judge to allow me to access to my son?
Leo has been trying but failing to find a place for Stephen closer to home.
I don't have a huge issue with Islington. What they failed to do is be more proactive. It's 3.5 years. You know, he went there for 28 days or then 3 months. It still takes 2 hours to get there. And it's still a hospital. It's still very much a prison.
I went with Leo and her brother to see what an assessment and treatment unit is really like.
I tried calling the hospital a few times to tell them that I was on my way. No one picked up the phone. Yesterday I called ahead to prepare them and tell them, Mommy's coming and can we go for a walk and everything else? Well, that went in one ear, came out of the other. So I got in and Stephen is asleep. He went to go see Mummy, walk with Mummy. So we walk around the building, the grounds of the hospital. He even had a teeny weeny of a smile looking at me. He did go on the exercise machines there, which is fantastic. It's the first time ever I've seen him doing that.
And how are you feeling now that you have to leave?
Not good. It kills me. Now I'm going home to again to my other life kind of thing, because I feel like I have 2 lives. There's this big thing in my heart. There's this emptiness in my life. I'm waiting for my son.
I've seen Leo's emails from Islington Council that admit the hospital is not the best place for Stephen, but they are struggling to find alternative care closer to home. Islington Council told me they couldn't comment on the case, but said they're making it easier for people with autism to live closer to home. The latest independent report on care provision for people with learning disabilities says not enough is being done to implement reform.
There's a huge issue around whether or not nationally there's enough housing that social care providers can get access to in order to enable people to come out of hospital. So the point about there being a critical shortage is very much putting the warning signal out now that there isn't sufficient housing or sufficient staff to just magically overnight move 3,000 people out of hospital. There is a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, and it's not just in localised areas, it is a problem across the country.
This issue has been left with Transforming Care partnerships. This means solutions to bring people back into the community will again depend on local councils' budgets and their willingness to act. The number of people in privately owned care has more than doubled over the last decade, with some beds costing over £12,000 a week.
The clinician who has fundamental power in terms of determining whether someone should remain under a section is employed by the organisation that's profiting from the use of the bed to a very high degree, maybe £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 a week. So there is a conflict of interest.
Last year, St Andrew's Hospital in Northampton, where Stephen Andrade Martinez stayed, made almost £13 million in pre-tax profits. The Cambion Group that runs Lifeway's centre where Thomas Rawnsley was cared for made £110 million. Signet Healthcare, one of the UK's largest independent mental health care providers, made over £31 million. A spokesperson from St Andrew's Healthcare said,
"Profit plays absolutely no part in how long a patient stays at St Andrews."
The Cambion Group refused to comment. Signet Healthcare said,
"Any decision about a patient's placement is taken on clinical grounds and is not taken in isolation."
I miss him here because I think about all the moments that we've had together in this park, and I know there are certain things that he'd be enjoying. He'd be loving the fact that Wellington was running after sticks, and he'd probably be throwing a few for him too.
We'd reached a crisis point. My son's literally trying to kill me and saying as much for half an hour. Yeah. What else could we do? That wasn't a situation we could live with, literally.
Isabel and Robin's son Matthew has autism and learning disabilities.
Hello everyone, my name's Matthew.
Over the past couple of years, they noticed a change in his behaviour, but with no support, they didn't know who to turn to.
Well, we just had nothing, so we went from bumbling along, trying to get through as a family, to
Psychiatrists saying to the police,
police,
take them to
sectioning,
A&E.
psychiatrists, kind of, crisis point on all fronts.
Help is not forthcoming, and every bit of help that we have had has been as a result of us fighting tooth and nail.
After a high-profile campaign, the Garnets got Matthew out of the assessment and treatment unit, 5 months later than planned.
What do you need to see happening for your family?
Short, in one word, action. Action.
Matthew has now been moved to a specialist hospital.
We parents, we're so exhausted and we're stressed, and we shouldn't be the one providing services. Sorry, it makes me really cross. What I think is so desperately unfair is that I know that there are families who are going through similar things to us, or worse, who, for whatever reason, aren't in a position to fight for their children, and are so beaten by the system that they can't fight for what should be their child's right.
Across the country, autism services are closing down. The People's Centre for Change is one community service suffering at the hands of these cuts. Open for the last 25 years, Camden Council now want to close it to make way for luxury flats.
It's a community facility and it should be preserved for the community. So this is a campaign we continue to have with the council. Once gone, this is gone forever. There is no way we're going to have a building for the community like this.
When I approached Camden Council, they refused to comment. 15 miles down the road, and another centre is under threat. Campaigner Siobhan started a petition to keep it open. It now has over 6,000 signatures.
It's the only respite centre we have for children with special needs, and I just couldn't see it go without a fight. 35, 40 families need respite in the borough and they're being denied it, and it's going to get even worse.
Hannah Mahmood has been using Hella House for the last 8 years.
I think it will really impact us as a family because we rely on this one overnight stay that my son gets once every 3 weeks for us to do things as a normal family unit, things that aren't easily done with 2 children on the autistic spectrum.
I contacted Ealing Council multiple times, but they didn't respond.
The huge elephant in the room throughout this process has been that while health budgets are ring-fenced, and so those hospital beds, the funding for those are still in place, social care, particularly in adult social services, cuts are being felt all over the place. Local authorities are really feeling pressure.
The social care funding gap is expected to reach up to £3.5 million by 2020. George Osborne announced plans to reduce this by allowing local authorities to raise council tax by 2%. But according to the Local Government Association, even if all 152 authorities took advantage of this, there would still be a significant hole. The situation seems ironic when autism awareness is at an all-time high.
So let me say this audibly. I have autism, but there is so much more to me.
We're getting there. I commend things like relaxed screenings. Wicked just did a relaxed show. I just think it's wonderful that people are getting these opportunities. Going to the cinema is great, but actually if I still can't go to my GP and have them treat me like a human being and treat my illness and trust me when I tell them that I'm ill and not assume that it's all about my autism, then we've still got a way to go.
For families seeking to get children out of the system now, every minute counts. Mark Neary started a campaign called 7 Days of Action, which aims to raise awareness of people living in assessment and treatment units. More than 500 parents are involved. Mark was inspired to start the group after his son was illegally detained by Hillingdon Council for almost a year.
It seems like kind of one of the things of the social care world is that the clients are sort of treated as not quite human. So we wanted to tell some very human stories. the more the sort of general public get to know about what life's really like in a unit, then that hopefully could lead to some sort of change.
These children are on the government's radar. Everyone is in agreement that assessment and treatment units are inappropriate for long-term care. Transforming Care's investment of £45 million is a substantial amount. But as long as the government rely on administrative measures to drive change, progress will continue to be slow.
Even if I'm 80, I want Stephen to live with me, in my house, with the people he loves. You know, he needs family life. He needs the love of his family. In fact, that's his basic human right. I go as far as saying human rights.
The dysfunctional system between health and social care means that NHS England is geared to crisis, and care in the community is still underfunded.
Really, he should be free. He should be able to just arrange to come round. Can I have a cup of tea, Mum, if I pop round? Or me pop round to you, Ed, and I'll bring Donnie round, we'll take him for a walk. Just simple little things like that, I know, would just really, make him so happy.
To create lasting change, the government needs to come up with a coherent policy that joins up the dots between local authorities, clinical commissioning groups and NHS England.
Well, life's different. Thomas certainly isn't in it, but I spent my whole life fighting for Thomas, and I still am, and I will continue to do so if it takes my last breath.
Otherwise, families' lives will continue to be devastated.
It's my job to make him safe and happy in the world, and that it's that simple, and I'm not sure how well we're doing on that at the moment, but it is that simple, and he's relatively safe at the moment. He's not very happy, so we've not done our job yet, so you just keep going.
Yeah, that's amazing actually.
So I'm not at home, and we will go back home.